Hey, Mitch.
Oh, hey, Ed, what's up?
Hey, guess what? Do you realize it's the 45th anniversary of 1976's King Kong?
Oh, yeah, I love that movie. It's one of my favorites.
Yeah, I thought we could talk about it because, it is based on a documentary.
No, it's not,
Yeah,
Ed.
yeah,
King
yeah.
Kong's not.
Yeah, King Kong is real. I make a point of not even carrying bananas around because I'm afraid that he might attack me.
Oh, yeah, well, guess what, buddy?
What?
I got a giant banana right here, and
Uh,
nothing's ever happened.
yeah, I wouldn't do that if I was you.
But, ah!
Hi, this is Ed Dollister.
This is Mitch Halleck.
And welcome to Mitch and Ed's Excellent Adventure. If you're new to the show, thank you so much for joining us. Or if you're a regular viewer, hope you enjoy what we've got in store for you today. Hey, Mitch, if people want to, find out a little bit about our show, what can they do?
Oh, it's as easy as peeling a banana, Ed. All you do is simply click the little subscribe button down there, and you'll be notified whenever Ed and I do a brand new episode on this show. And while you're there, why don't you just hit the like button because it helps the old YouTube algorithms and makes us feel good. And don't forget, if this is your first episode, like Ed just mentioned, we have a whole catalog of back episodes, over 33
Yep.
shows that you can look at, everything from the $6 Million Man to Falcon and Winter Soldier to Justice League, Wonder Woman, Land of
Battlestar
the Lost.
Galactica. Yep.
Oh, you name it, we got it. So just check us out as we add more and more to our shows. Check out what we've done over the last year.
That'll be fantastic. And if you like the show, you can also comment and give suggestions. And in fact, Daniel, listener and to the IndieCast and viewer to our show, suggested, what about 1976's King Kong? And I said to Mitch, I have fond memories of that movie. I quite liked it. That would be fantastic to do. So that's what we're doing. We're looking at Dino De Laurentiis's epic blockbuster, King Kong. Did you get to see this in the movies, Mitch?
Oh God, yeah. I mean, this is 1976 Christmas, I think.
It
Because I
was,
do
yes.
remember it was being cold outside. And I grew up with, here in the States, they would have the 4:30 movie on Channel 7 in New York, and they would show Godzilla movies and they would show King Kong movies and King Kong versus Godzilla. And my dad was, older than me, obviously, but he grew up with the original King Kong, the black and white. So we would see it whenever it was on reruns. But the whole idea, I mean, I was about 9 or 10, yeah, about that, 76. So I went to see it because I had read about the production of this, and all they talked about was how Dino De Laurentiis built a 40-foot tall King Kong robot.
Yes.
And when you're a kid, robots and science fiction and 40-foot tall thing, you're like, this is crazy. And plus, they just filmed it in New York City, where at the world's tallest building at the time, the late great World Trade Center, which was even more insane. You're like, oh my God, he climbs it. And I couldn't wait to see it. And I saw it, like, I must have seen that movie 6 or 7 times when it came out during the Christmas break. I just kept begging my parents to take me again on the weekend to go see it. And anybody I could grab, my grandmother, my sisters, my cousins. I love that movie.
Well, of course, the original, it's based on the 1933 classic movie, which was only about an hour long. It was actually
Yeah.
not just over. It wasn't a very long, it was a very tightly packed movie, which was groundbreaking for its stop motion special effects. Story, little thin, but it was up there for spectacle. I mean, they call Kong the eighth wonder of the world for a reason, where he climbs the Empire State Building. It's quite an iconic moment in cinema history. Many years later, there's some iterations of Kong that you see, Kong versus Godzilla, and there's Mighty Joe Young as well, which was sort of a, not really a spin-off, but sort of
I think there's Son of Kong too.
Yeah.
His little baby movie there, and it had the original cast. And I'm pretty sure that was a sad one. He dies at the end, like the island sinks, like
Spoiler.
Skull Island. goes down in the water and you see a little hand come up. I'm pretty sure that's Son of Kong. I'm a little hazy on that because Mighty Joe Young, you said, came out too, and that was more of a heroic, uh, big gorilla story where he like
Yes.
saves the kids from a burning building and stuff. And I don't know, but when you just mentioned that, I do remember there was a very bad movie about King Kong in the 60s by Rankin and Bass, the people that made those Rudolph the Red-Nosed
Yes.
Reindeer and all those Christmas movies. And there was a gorilla robot, like he fought like a robot King Kong. It
Yeah,
was
not
it's
Mecha something. I know.
it's
I
like
can
Mecha
picture it.
Kong or yeah, it's bad. I don't know why the color blue keeps coming to mind. Like I think it was like a bluish tint, the robot Kong. I don't know, we gotta look it up, but yeah, it wasn't good. It wasn't good.
So flash forward to mid 70s, Dino De Laurentiis manages to get the rights for King Kong. There was also I think it was Michael Eisner was also looking at doing a version of Kong where they had these
Yeah,
dueling you know properties, a bit like I suppose Armageddon and
yeah.
when they always have those same sort of
Deep
comet
Impact. Yeah,
or
yeah,
Deep Impact or
yeah.
Volcano and Dante's Peak. It's that sort of thing.
Well,
Um,
there was a legal thing about this too. Like the rights, it's a very obscure origins. Like RKO Pictures
mm,
were the people that produced the original King Kong, and then the rights went into, I'm gonna say like I don't know, Paramount or something, and
mhm.
something about this King Kong movie. They were gonna have two Kong movies coming out almost within a year or two of each
Yes,
other, but Universal had the rights, and then Paramount had the rights, and they were both gonna do it, but different types of stories about Kong. One was a remake, and one was a modern version of it. The whole thing was very convoluted, but I guess they just came to agreement on it because it was one of the most expensive movies ever made at the time. Like Dino De Laurentiis, this guy, he splurged. He didn't hold back.
yeah,
He was like the Salklands when it came to like their Superman movie. This guy
yes.
spent a fortune on the production of this movie, and he was just like he's crazy. There's a funny sketch with John Belushi from Saturday Night Live where
Hmm.
he impersonates Dino De Laurentiis, and they have him on a talk show,
Yeah.
and they're talking about the production of the movie, and they're like, "Why did you spend so much money on this giant gorilla that everyone already knows the story? Like every school kid knows what happens to King Kong." And Belushi's like doing Dino De Laurentiis, and he goes, "Oh, they talk about Jaws. When Jaws dies, nobody cries. Nobody cries when the shark blows up. But when my Kong dies, people cry. People are going to weep. There's so much emotion in this movie." So he didn't come at this like it's just a simple jungle adventure
Mm.
movie with a giant ape. He was, I think he thought he was making Romeo and Juliet, which was one of his earlier movies, I think. And I don't know what was going on with Dino, but
Well, there
he,
there are
he
there are look, there are elements, and I've got to say it is quite emotional. I think at the end, and again,
yeah.
no surprise, you do feel for Kong and oh my God, those helicopters really
Oh
shoot
yeah.
him up. Oh my God, he's covered in blood. Oh, it's
Oh,
pretty horrendous.
it was something.
But
I was gonna say, well, before you say that, there's one thing I always had a problem with.
yeah,
You see that poster?
yeah,
You
there
see
were no
those jet planes?
I know.
And if it was lower, he's actually straddling both of the twin towers, like one foot's here and
I
the other foot's
know.
on the north tower and the south tower. That never happened in the movie. And not only that, it did not happen during the day. Okay.
Yeah.
It was at night
At
that
night it
time.
was actually, yeah.
Yes.
But you don't sort of it's details. It's all about, publicity to sell that. And I've got to say
Yeah.
the artwork, the production design, they had lots of different posters. They had him with a giant snake. They had
Oh
him
yeah,
with
yeah, yeah.
the subway or the railway carriage doing that, those jets. And I vividly remember that plane thinking, oh my gosh, he's totally destroying that jet. How's he
Yeah,
gonna
there it
do
is.
that? And I suppose the one thing that that's obvious looking at those posters is that it is a product of the 70s. They've updated the story.
Yeah.
No Empire State Building, World Trade Center.
No.
They're not really looking for. They're not making a film. It's not
No,
Dano
it
Carl
wasn't
Dano
like the
looking for a
original.
film.
Yeah.
There's
Yeah.
it's the Petrox Explorer where they're looking for oil, which is of
Yep.
course during the 70s in the United States. I don't think it was really here, but in the United States it was the gas crisis
That oil
that
crisis. Yeah,
that
yeah.
was
Gas shortages.
going
Yep.
on. So it was quite relevant, and I feel like they were trying to make it relevant to audiences of the time. I think it
Oh
worked.
yeah. Oh yeah.
Actually, it
I
was quite
remember. Yeah. Like you said, I remember 1976. We're talking about pollution was still a big thing. It still is, but I remember back then there was a lot of environmental stuff because the character played by Jeff Bridges,
Yes.
Jack, he's this like before they even call him environment, like a tree hugger type of guy.
Yep.
And he shows up and he's talking about they have Skull Island and he sneaks aboard the ship and he as they're doing a little slideshow about what they're about to do, he comes on, he goes, oh, and and this gaseous cloud that surrounds the island, it's because of deposits of blah blah blah. And there's a ancient legend about this giant monkey that's on the thing. And he goes on about it. But I remember the whole point of it was like uh, Charles Grodin, who plays I can't think of his name, but he plays the character who's like in charge of the oil expedition. He's like, oh, look at Exxon, we'll put a tiger in your tank, we're going to give you Kong, that becomes part of it. But all they're really doing is looking for oil.
Yes.
They can care less. They don't care who gets in their way. They just want this done. They just want to get the next big oil deposit. And that's all it was. And I remember as a kid, like, okay, because it was on the news every night here.
Yeah.
I mean, there was gas shortages and rationings and odd and even number license plates, like you can get gas on Tuesday and Thursday and not Monday. It was a big topic. So he was dead on, and it was a movie of its time when you talk about that.
Yeah.
It was very realistic for all of us back in the 70s.
Yeah. So Jeff
the
Bridges'
States.
character, he managed to spot a ship that or someone floating on a dinghy.
Life raft.
A life raft, and then there it is. It is Jessica Lange in her film debut. She's never acted before in her life. She's a model, and she's playing not Dawn, but Dwan.
Yeah, yeah, that was always kind of goofy. Even when I was 10 years old, I was like, wait, what? And what's ironic is I have a cousin named Dawn.
Yes.
And I always remember that, like it's my cousin Gwyneth's older sister, Dawn. And I'm like, hey, you could swap your letters around and be Dwan. And she's like, well, that's dumb.
Maybe she was dyslexic. Who knows?
Dyslexic. Yeah, that's it. She couldn't spell her name. You know what's odd that you talked about some of the other people in the movie. It's not odd, but we're going to see Jack O'Halloran, who's
Non
from the Superman movies.
Yeah.
He's one of the I don't know, not first mate, but he's one of the folks on board the ship. And I remember he spots her, and they bring her up aboard the oil tanker. And even as a kid, there was some weird storyline going on. I don't think they ever addressed it. She was on board a yacht, and the captain of the boat and her boyfriend were watching Deep Throat, which was a porno movie in the 70s, and she didn't want to watch it, so she leaves, and somehow the ship sinks and blows up, and she's on a life raft. There was like a weird backstory of that, and I'm like, wait, what? How? What? Where? What's going on? But whatever.
They were out in the middle of nowhere. It's not like
they're in the middle of nowhere. That's what I'm saying. Yeah, it's not like a yacht is like off the coast of Florida or something. I mean, they're deep in the middle of the Pacific, maybe. I guess they don't tell you which ocean, but yeah, they're headed to Skull Island. I mean, maybe there's like a timeshare island nearby, like not so rough island.
Yes.
Yeah. Anyway, we digress. But
so she tags along.
Yeah,
there's a few little odd things in here. She tags along. I remember I've got the Blu-ray. It's funny, I didn't bring the Blu-ray here with me, but they've got that, and I think they're just re-releasing a new version, a new Blu-ray with the extended cut.
In May. Yep.
So those sort of things. But watching, I'm going, Jessica Lange, she's not wearing a lot. She's not wearing a lot.
No, that's another odd thing. Well, not odd, but yeah, when you're 10 years old.
But
I was going to say a 10-year-old boy in a Catholic school, you tend to notice these things like, darn, Dwan doesn't have much clothes on. Golly. Yeah. But yeah, no wonder I saw that movie 8 or 10 times.
Right.
Anyway, we digress. And then she becomes part of the crew.
Yes.
She happens to fashion a nice little wardrobe from some of the sailors' clothing.
Yes.
Not too much, a lot of cutoffs, a lot of halter tops.
Yeah. But hey, it was the 70s, so that's okay. And
yeah.
And they make their way to the island where they see the amazing, great sets. A lot of physical sets and some really nice matte paintings in here as well.
Oh yeah. That giant wall. Remember that?
Yes.
That was they did build that. I mean, they didn't build the entire wall, but they built a portion of it, and it was a huge set. But geez, when I was a kid, and I remember seeing that on the big screen when they would have the big 70mm movie screens, and it just dwarfed everything. And I remember sitting in like the 4th or 5th row. It seemed like it was in front of you and 100 feet tall, and you're like, what is that? And they did such a good job building up the suspense. I mean, a lot of folks love the original movie, and I've said this before when we talked about Flash Gordon. You're going to get your purists that love the 1933 King
Yes.
Kong, and nothing could ever touch it. And it's like Star Wars is to us, or Raiders of the Lost Ark. Don't you
Yeah.
even think about remaking it? So many people were giving this movie a hard time when it came out. Like, oh, why did they do this? Why did they do that? I didn't, I was just going for a movie experience, and I remember seeing that giant wall and the ocean and the oil tanker. There's a beautiful shot when they hit the beach. I think they filmed it in Hawaii
Yeah.
when they first come ashore, and there was like a black sand, and there's this arch, and
Yes. Yes.
Jessica Lange runs up on the beach, and Jeff Bridges is Jack Prescott. He's got his
Yep.
cameras. He's taking photos of her stuff. But even as a kid, I recognize how beautiful the scenery was. I think it's, like I said, I think it's Hawaii, but it just looked amazing. Like, wow, this is a real jungle. This is
Oh
not a
yes,
backlot.
and you
You-
know what? I'm the thing that impresses me most is that that ring of fog that's around the island.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
That um uh that was real. I don't know. I
Wow.
still don't know how they did that, but it was real. It looks amazing how they,
Oh, I
it's not
never
a
heard
digital
that.
effect or anything like that. It was very cool. I wondered they just had some, grips with some smoke, on a speedboat going around the perimeter, but it was very impressive. And yeah, the sets were impressive. And again, the only precedence, I suppose, before that, the big blockbuster was Jaws, which you
Yeah, but
mentioned
Jaws
earlier. But
Jaws is a very small movie. I
it
mean,
is, it is. That was a
there's not many
blockbuster. This
sets.
was
Yeah,
trying to be a blockbuster, I think,
yeah,
and
yeah.
it was
They
pretty.
had a lot of those movies back then. I don't know if you remember, but in the 70s, it was all about the blockbuster movie. It was all about the Towering Inferno, Earthquake. It was these big event movies, and I think that was King Kong's main focus too, not just to tell the story, but they want to be that epic, big
Yes.
movie of the year type of thing,
Well, the director
There's a
of King Kong was the director of Towering Inferno, John Gilliman.
Oh, there you
So
go. That's maybe why I
yeah,
got
so
that
he
feeling
did.
to it.
Yeah, so he did the Blue Max with
Oh, the airplane picture with Robert
Papard.
Red.
Yeah.
Yeah,
He's
George Papard. Yeah, you're right.
yeah.
I'm thinking of Waldo Pepper. That's a
Oh
different
yes,
one.
with Robert Redford, yeah. So he was pretty much right off Towering
Yeah.
Inferno, which again was pretty epic. He was known for being, pretty fast and
Oh,
clean with
really?
his action sequences, and had a bit of a temper and everything like that. Again, that's some of
Well,
that great production artwork that you would see that,
yeah, I don't know. I mean, we could go look it up. I think the artist on a lot of this stuff is a guy named Boris Vallejo. I might be wrong about that. He was like a fantasy artist there, but
yes,
it seems to have a certain look to it. Uh, yeah, I mean, these are the things I would see as a kid, and it captured your imagination. You saw pictures of Kong fighting a giant snake, Kong on top of the World Trade Center, Kong, this all these images. You're like, oh my God, is that going to really look like that?
yes,
And you couldn't wait. And then when they capture her, the natives capture her,
yes,
and then they drug her, and then they bring her up there. I just remember that being in the theater with the music and the sounds and the Dolby stereo, like boom, boom, the
yeah,
drums. And as Kong approaches, they don't show him. It's kind of like Jaws in the same way.
yes.
He slowly walks towards you, and you see
You
the
see some
trees
trees moving, you
falling
see his
over,
feet.
and
Yeah,
yeah, she's looking up, and then she looks up and sees that massive face, and he just does the pounding of the chest. And again, I had no idea who Rick Baker was. I didn't realize it was a guy in a suit. When you're 10 years old, you tend to believe a lot of stuff they tell you. Still do. I thought that was a robot. I was like, "Oh my God, that's a giant robot!" And I'm gonna find out later on how disappointing that real robot
I
looked.
know.
But yeah, and the effect was great with the giant hand that's came down and scooped up Dwan or Jessica
Yes.
Lange, and then he just looks down at her. And now watching it, I can tell you it's definitely a guy in a suit, because even with the great miniature work they did, the
Yep.
lighting, it's just it just doesn't like, not that I've encountered giant 40, 50-foot gorillas in the
Well,
woods
apart
when I'm
from
walking.
earlier at the start of the show, but yes.
It does, yeah, yeah. Sorry for that, but it did have a little like, oh, that's a guy in a suit,
Yeah, well, I know that I mean, Rick Baker, if you don't know, he's a special effects makeup artist who worked on Star Wars. He's worked on he won the first Academy Award
Yeah,
for
yeah.
makeup effects for American Werewolf in
Girl
London.
from London,
He
yep.
got to work later on Mighty Joe Young, the Disney
The Star
remake.
Wars bar. He did some of the
Yes.
aliens in that.
So
Yeah.
he ended up playing the Kong the creature, and they did have a lot of it wasn't just him in a suit. It was his eyes. They had he wore contact lenses, but they also
Yeah,
had a lot of
well, that wasn't Stuart Freeborn, was it? That did a lot of the mechanics. I know
I
Carlo
don't
Rambaldi. He's
Carlo
the guy,
Rambaldi designed that. They sort of worked
the
in
giant
tandem.
arm. Yeah. Carlo Rambaldi. People are going to know him from his work on E.T.
Yes.
when he made E.T. years later, what, 5 years later. It's weird
Yep.
how it was so close to 6 years.
Yep.
But they made a giant mechanical hand. I mean, we talk about the robot, but they did have a working, scale size hand that they would use
Yes.
for a lot of the shots, picking up Jessica Lange and reaching in and stuff. Yeah, that looked a little phony at the time. I mean, looking back at it now, but it worked. It was a legitimate hydraulic arm, and I remember reading stories back at the time of the making of the movie, like it almost crushed her at one point. I mean, it just closed its hand, and they couldn't get it to open up again. So
Yes,
they
I
had to,
think like Bruce the Shark, it was a little
yeah,
unreliable at times. And watching it back on the Blu-ray that we've got in Australia, it look, it's still pretty impressive. What lets the film down a lot with the visual effects is their blue screen or their keying effects.
yeah,
So
the
you can
lines,
see the lines, and I think if I'm not sure if they're doing. I know they're doing it for the Indiana Jones. They're cleaning up some visual effects.
Yes,
I don't know if they've done that for King Kong. If they would get rid of some of those blue screen, those matte lines,
yeah.
I think it would work a lot better. It just pulls you out a little bit.
I was gonna say the worst example of that is in that scene where he's got her in some kind of bizarre part of Skull Island. Looks like the moon almost. It's like
Yes.
Dark.
That's on the towers, which he
there's those mountains that look like the
Center.
Twin Towers. Yeah, and the snake comes in.
Yes.
And there's just some parts of it, like you said, when he goes to yell, you could see that there's that definitive blue lighting that happens on a green screen. Not like when we do it here, the special effects here at the Mitch and Ed show. But it takes away. But I guess at its time, I mean, that's the best they could do.
Well, it did win
lighting wise.
It did share the best special effects Oscar with Logan's Run.
Oh, okay.
So
that's more of a practical movie. I don't remember being a lot of blue screen in Logan's Run. I remember just being a lot of movie sets and
miniatures and things like that.
And miniatures, yeah.
But I suppose, it was. They also had multiple heads for different emotions because they couldn't put all the animatronics in one to do everything. So, for example, when he's, the great scene where he dries her by, blowing.
Yes,
which was pretty impressive.
It looks a little goofy now because I've seen it since then, and I go, yeah, that looks weird because his cheeks get like he's blowing a trumpet, like he's Louis Armstrong. He's like,
yes,
they're huge suddenly. They just like inflated. I'm like, what's
maybe
going
they
on?
overdid it a little bit, but
yeah, they did.
And I've got to say, he does. He is really into Jessica Lange.
Well,
because there are some. He does have those. There's some shots where you go with his crazy eyes. That he's.
Know what you're talking about, Ed?
He does go a little bit gaga for.
Who wouldn't, Ed? She was a stunning actress at the time. I mean, like I said, one of the reasons why I saw that movie so often, I was just like, hey, Jessica Lange, But the funny thing is, after this movie, Jessica Lange doesn't work for a good, I don't know if it was intentional or
she took acting lessons.
She went to Broadway. Yeah, but it was a good 2 years or more that she took off before she shows up again. And I think it was maybe The Postman Always Rings Twice with Jack Nicholson. I think that's why she came, or when she came back. But it wasn't well received. In fact, a lot of the cast got hammered for it. I mean, Jeff Bridges, I always like Jeff Bridges. He never gives a bad performance, no matter what movie Jeff Bridges is in, whether it's Iron Man or Starman or Tucker. He's always good. But I don't think he liked this production. I don't think he talked about it fondly, No,
well, I think they realized they weren't the star of the movie. Kong is the the star, but I mean they give earnest performances. Charles Grodin,
Grodin's
as
great.
He's great. He's an unlikable, which is what he's supposed to be. There's some other you mentioned. Jack Halloran from
Rene Auberjonois. We
yes,
talked about him. He was the geologist that works for the Rocks. Is it Roxxon? No, it was what is the name of the club? Petrox. That's it. Yeah, Roxxon's in Marvel. But he's the one. He has the great line. I remember being as a kid when he shows up and they do some samples of the oil that they find, and he sits down and tells Charles Grodin, he's like, "Oh yeah, don't worry, this stuff will be great in what is it, mere tick of the clock." Oh, how long is that? Oh, geological years. Oh, about 10,000 years.
Yeah.
And he just opens a flask bottle and he starts drinking and he's laughing about it. And
Yeah.
that's when Grodin gets the idea. Fred is his name in the
Yes.
movie. He gets the idea like, oh, okay, if we can't bring back the oil, we're going to bring back something better. We're going to bring back Kong,
Yes.
and we're going to make that the new trademark of Petrox or whatever. But yeah, and then they built that giant trap. Remember that?
Yes.
They dig it up. They have where they
And they put
suddenly
all
got
the
bulldozers. Yeah, I don't know, but they did, you know.
they're fast workers, you know.
Yeah, I mean, and they had enough. Was it nitrous oxide? I don't know what they knocked
Yes.
them out with. I'm like, they usually carry that much drugs on the.
Well,
chloroform?
even before that, they go to try and rescue Dwan from Kong.
Yeah.
And that's when you get that great sequence, you know, which was in the original as well on the log where
The
they're,
log. Oh, that scared
that
the
was
hell out of me.
terrifying.
Oh yeah. They all
Um,
fall off. That was and then I remember when the one survivor staggers back to the camp,
yes.
and they're like, "What happened?" He just goes, I'm like, "Oh, they're all dead." Yeah, that
Yeah.
was creepy. It again, you could tell that's a guy in a suit though on that scene, but it was still scary when he was
Oh,
twisting
yeah.
it back and forth and they were falling to their death. I mean,
Yeah.
you know.
Did you know that one of the cast was John Lone, the actor from not just
Oh, from the Shadow?
the Shadow? Yes, that was his first
No, I
role.
didn't know that.
Yeah,
Oh, I did not
he
know
played
that.
he played the cook.
Oh, okay. I was gonna say, the fella that played the skipper,
Yeah,
the character actor. I can't think of his name right now, but I almost think he looks like he was in the original King Kong. You know, like was this guy in the original movie? But the one other sequence we talk about, and I remember being grossed out as a kid, is when the snake comes to get Dwan and Kong wrestles it,
yeah.
and he twists it, and it just the skin just rips apart. I mean, now I can
And
tell
he
it's like
he pulls the
rubber.
jaw, breaks the jaws open, and yeah,
Yeah. See, that's something I remember vividly, that he ripped the jaws open and like this white foam came out of the jaws of it after he
yeah.
killed it. I've seen that since that movie, and either they cut that scene out with the jaw
There
ripping
was
part, or they
Yeah,
added it
look,
somewhere else.
there was, you know, like I think we've said this with other films, like with Superman the movie. You know, there's the television version where they
Yeah,
you know, they have different alternate scenes, or you know, less swearing or nudity and things like that, and
yeah.
they
Yeah.
add scenes in. That was definitely in. I remember seeing
I
that.
saw,
I mean,
yeah, I did see it, but if you go to watch it now, like on Amazon Prime, I went to watch before we did this.
yeah.
That scene's not in there, and I'm like,
Unless it's like the Mandela effect, where we, you know, assume it's.
yeah. I'm like, maybe it never happened. Maybe
But
I
I'm
didn't
pretty
see
sure
that.
it did. I'm pretty
See,
sure
so
it did.
you remember it too. You remember the jaws being ripped
Yeah.
open and like this like foamy spit
Yeah.
came out the sides. Yeah, okay. I thought it was just me being crazy.
So they eventually get you know, him back. They take him in the oil tanker. They obviously couldn't
Yep.
put any oil in there, but they
Right.
had it. So again, I felt like it sort of fit. The story fit, you know,
No, it
with
works.
and
It
everything
works.
like that. So Charles Grodin, as you said, wants to promote Petrox. So they basically get Giant Kong in a 40-foot petrol
And this
belter.
is the only scene in the movie with the real 40-foot robot.
Yep.
Is
And
that
they-
scene at
yep.
Shea Stadium, which you were at? You were actually at Citi Field
Yes.
when you came to the States
Yeah.
that time. That used to be Shea Stadium. That
Hang
was
on.
right next door.
So
Yeah.
were we there? Why didn't you tell me that? Oh my god!
I didn't realize it. Now I just saw like that was Shea Stadium. That was where you came to the New York Mets. Right next to that was where we went to the World's Fair.
Yeah.
It was all like tied into it. Like, oh, the World's Fair, the biggest thing ever, and then King Kong's there. Anyway, they wheeled them out. They had that robot,
Yep.
and it doesn't look good at all. I mean, it is like I don't know how much money they spent. I think over
Oh.
$10 million,
Yeah.
which is crazy money back then for a
Because
practical
the film
effect.
only cost $18 million, I think.
I know, and they spent it all on this giant robot, and it looks bad. I mean, it
Well-
looks like a big stuffed animal or something, and it's there, and it's
I
like,
think it looks all right in the still photos, but basically
Yeah.
all it could do was raise its arms and move
Yeah.
its head,
size, like
and they
It's like
used
me.
it for pretty much maybe 6 seconds of the
see,
entire.
that's all I heard it was. Now, I don't know how much that thing weighed or how much it was to assemble it, but you got to understand how Dino De Laurentiis must have pulled his hair out of his head when they showed up with that thing, and he was like, "That's it." that's what we spent this money on, you
Yeah.
know? So I mean, I've yet to see any of the blueprints on the working part, like what was
Yes.
inside of that. Was it just like paper
It
mache?
really was just a frame with its arms that could move in its
A
head.
lot of
But
hair.
they
Yeah.
did, yes. What did they use? I read they used tons and
Well,
tons of not yak hair, but something
yeah, oh,
ridiculous.
those poor yaks, man. There's a lot of bald yaks out there between Star Wars and this movie. They're like, hey, man, where's my hair?
Yeah.
But they do that scene. And here's another one that I don't remember if it's real or the Mandela effect. Fred, aka Charles Grodin's character, that Kong breaks loose. Okay, they
Yeah.
bring Dwan there, and Jack Prescott, aka Jeff Bridges, he leaves. They have a little
Yeah.
exchange there, and he doesn't want to be part of it. He goes off to a bar nearby, and Kong breaks loose. I remember Charles Grodin's character being stepped on.
Yes.
Like Kong's walking and everyone's running for their lives or whatever, and you see this big foot, and then there he is, and he looks up, he's like, ah, and you see the foot. You don't see him squish, but you just see the
Yeah.
foot come down, and they do a quick cut. That's the way I remember him dying. Do you ever remember anything
No,
differently?
no, what I remember is him being stepped on, and I
Yes.
remember the foot going up, and I remember you could see his hat, but his hat was
Okay.
but his hat, what I remember his hat not being squashed, and I thought that seems odd. But then when we watched it again, he does get squashed, and you see his hat like in the footprint of
Flutter away.
Kong.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
what in the original test screenings, he didn't get, he survived.
Oh,
The
okay.
audiences wanted to get him, his comeuppance or whatever. They
Yeah,
wanted
yeah,
to
yeah.
get it. So yeah, he ends up being squashed, and then Kong is wandering through New York. There's some great
Yep.
sequences,
Oh,
and
yeah.
and this is what I think maybe that's why I like the movie as well, because I remember going to Universal Studios, and
Yeah.
I got to do in I think in Florida they had Kongfrontation, but in Los Angeles
Yeah.
it
It
was
was
King
that one.
Kong.
Yeah. Yeah,
Where
I went to that one too, and that's where they had it. You go on a
you go through
Universal.
the subway. You
You
go
go through, yeah, in a train, and Kong shows up, and there's fire,
Yep.
like explosions, and he takes the tram or the
And
bus or whatever
yes,
the train you're on, and it starts to rock.
yeah, and
And
there's
then
the helicopter, a giant
yeah,
It
yeah,
was
and there's a big
fantastic.
Kong right in your face. I mean, there's a
Yep.
big robot Kong. I was
Yep.
like, if it had looked like that thing back in '76, it would have been worth the money because that
Yeah.
thing was pretty good. I remember the heat from the
Yeah.
explosion when you were on that thing, you could feel it, and he was screaming and the whole thing shaking like that. That was a great effect. You're right. That was at Universal Studios in Los Angeles,
Yes.
and there was a different one
Yes.
at the Orlando
Yeah, that
one,
was
and there's even a newer
Kongfrontation.
one.
So
Yeah,
unfortunately, the one in Los Angeles
it
burnt
burned.
down.
Yeah,
And I just remember going through that queue. There was so much the graffiti. It was all family friendly graffiti, which was hard to
yeah.
do, but it just looked like a 1976
The New
as
York
I would
subway
imagine it,
train.
a
Yeah,
subway, and
yeah.
it was really good. You got to see all these wonderful scenes. In the movie, I remember him grabbing that the subway car or the train car and pulling it
Yeah,
and
yeah, yeah,
smashing
yeah.
it, and of course he made his way to the
Well, wait, go back. There's another scene here too. I don't remember if it's in what cut because when it did play on TV, you're right. They added like another 45 minutes of this stuff. So
yes,
you're like, oh, he grabs another blonde woman
yes, in the apartment.
in an apartment, and it's not Jessica Lange's character, and then he just throws her,
Yep,
just like throws her aside. And I was a kid going, ooh, that's gotta hurt because
yep,
she wasn't walking away from that one,
yep.
So,
But
and then
yeah, yep.
now did you? I was gonna say, did you have a scene where somehow Jack and Dwan are sitting alone in a bar
Yes,
and they're having a drink, talking about maybe they'll get married and maybe they'll get away from all this stuff, and somehow quietly King Kong's giant arm comes into this bar, not making a sound, like no one even notices it. What was in that drink? And he just picks her up and slowly carries her back. I'm like, you couldn't tell there's a 40-foot gorilla coming through the doorway, but
well,
the magic of movies.
that's
Anyway, he takes her and
and then he climbs up the World Trade Center and
he
jumps
does
across, and
the old World Trade
that's
Center.
when they
Yeah.
call in the military, of course,
Yeah, the
and
army.
he
Yeah.
gets shot up like you would not believe. Like it was,
Oh, it's bad. It's like
It's like
Really,
it's like
Bonnie
Carrie.
and
It's like
Clyde.
poured a bucket of blood all over him.
Oh yeah, it's like Carrie bad. It's like,
Yeah.
wow, he really gets killed. And I remember the World Trade Center, it just opened up in the early 70s. They were
Yes.
building it in the 60s. So again, it was like one of the real wonders of the world. It was such a magnificent giant construction. You were like, oh my God, it's the biggest
Mhm.
building. It's like a
Yeah.
quarter of a mile high. And the fact that he was up there, and I'm terrified of heights. I was always like, oh, that's got to be so scary. And he's just climbing the side of
Yeah.
it, and he gets on top. And like you said, he just jumps from one to the other, and he's got her there, and he puts her down. And when those helicopters come in, there's some really bizarre editing effects going on in that sequence because there's like close-ups of the machine guns opening fire with
Yeah.
and then you see again, here's some really bad uh, what do you want to call it? Rear projection
Yes.
going on here because it's like the helicopter suddenly is bigger than Kong. You know what I mean? It's like
I know,
the
because
perspective's
they didn't
totally
have
off.
motion tracking where you could, like do that sort of stuff. So
Yeah, yeah, it's awkward looking. You're like, wait a minute, how big is that machine gun all of a sudden? And here's another sick thing: chunks of meat are coming off of King
yeah,
Kong from
yeah,
the
yeah,
bullets. It's like,
yeah,
yeesh, it's PG.
yeah,
But when he falls and he makes that noise, it's like a big sound as he's coming and he smashes to the
yeah.
110 stories below or whatever. And then the impact, the scene, he just crashes into the sidewalk. As a kid, I'm going to tell you, like I joked about John Belushi saying, when Kong dies, you're going to cry. I remember almost, maybe I did cry. I was a big softy back then, not like I am now. But I remember the sound effect of his heart. Do you
Yes.
remember that? It was
Yeah.
like to this day, I always think of that too. It's like you hear boom, 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 and it's slowly winding down because he's dying, and then and then you just hear boom,
Yeah.
and there's no sound at all, and then the only next sound is Jessica Lange screaming. I remember as a kid, the whole theater was like dead quiet, like, oh no, King Kong's dead, and
Yeah.
then she's screaming, and then it just ends with the credits and Jack shows up, or he
Yeah.
doesn't get to her. Is that what it is?
No.
The
Yeah.
crowd surrounds her and they're taking pictures of her, and she's calling for him, like Rocky, looking for Adrian at the end of
Yeah.
Rocky
Was
One,
Beauty that
but he
killed the
doesn't get to her.
beast.
And then credits roll. We're
Yeah.
done.
And
No,
you saw, they had a life-size model, of Kong
yeah, they filmed
on
that down at
there.
the Trade Center.
Yeah,
Yeah,
they
yeah,
also asked
they
for
were extras.
they
New
asked for
York.
3,000 extras. 30,000 people showed up.
They
So
were worried. I remember hearing a story. They were worried that the structure was going to fall apart because they were standing
too
on
many
like one of the
people.
platforms. Too many people at one time, and they're like, "Hey, we never designed this for 30,000 people to
Yeah,
stand on this walkway." But yeah, that was a real photo. That was a real shot of the
yeah.
trade centers and stuff. Most of the trade center was empty because they hadn't rented out all that office
Ah,
space. They had
yep,
just built it. Oh,
yep.
see, it's falling down like Kong did.
Oh, that's right.
But yeah, no, even when you see it in Superman the movie, they would light it up at night. They would put the lights on empty offices just to make it look like
Ah,
there's people there. But
yeah,
that most of that building was unoccupied. So
huh,
a little known fact there.
yeah,
Now, Ed,
yeah.
what about we talk about the sequel, or do you not
Well, I
want
was
to talk
just going to
about that?
say it was so when it came out at Christmas, um, people think I think the perception of this movie is that it didn't do well. Um,
Yeah, they
but
would
it
call it a
actually
bomb. I remember that. Yeah.
but it actually tripled its budget. It did well. It
Yeah.
just I think it didn't meet up with this
It
reminds me
didn't
a
make
little bit of
Jaws money.
yeah,
Yeah.
I think it's a bit like not like Justice League, but when that originally came out and it didn't
Yeah, it made like
it still
700
made
million.
700 million
Yeah.
dollars. So
Yeah.
it didn't, it wasn't a flop, but people it's
Oh.
had that perception. So
How about Indiana Jones and the Crystal Skull? Makes 750 million. It was the
I
second biggest picture of the year next to The Dark Knight and
yep,
Iron Man. And that movie was terrible. It was a
I know.
flop. I go,
I
this is the
I
second
know.
biggest
It's
picture of
what
the year. Come on
yeah.
now.
So look, it did do pretty well. There was lots of merchandise. I missed. Well, you've got that wonderful the Kong glasses there.
Yeah, this is the soda glass. We're all famous with the Star Wars glasses and
Yep.
stuff, but here's a King Kong Coca-Cola glass from the day.
Yeah.
And there's a little story about Kong in the back, but
Yeah.
there's a bunch more of these things. I didn't get them all. I found this actually at an antique shop. I think I told you for like a quarter, 25 cents a couple years ago. And I'm like, oh, and it's in perfect shape. I mean,
Yeah. It
look
looks
at that.
good.
Kong. And then as a kid at the movie theaters, I remember when you'd walk out to the lobby at the candy center or the snack bar, they sold these little rubber erasers
Yes.
of King Kong. I don't know why, but they were like maybe 25 cents each, or they were really cheap, and they had different colors. There was green, red, blue. And I would go to the theater to see King Kong, and I remember buying these erasers and then bringing them to school because I was all into King Kong. In fact, I got in trouble now that I remember it. Thanks, King Kong. On Fridays, once a month at Catholic school, they had Casual Friday. Now you could wear whatever you wanted, but it had to be a collared shirt. And I had this beautiful King Kong t-shirt that I loved so much, and I wore it to school knowing that I was going to get in trouble because I was a bit of a rebel, but I don't care. I wanted everyone to see my King Kong shirt, and I wore it. And the nun came up to me and she said, "That's no collar on that. So you get a piece of paper saying you lost the privilege to wear casual stuff next month." But I didn't care because I showed people my Kong. And when my King Kong was on my t-shirt, people cried and people cried. But no, there was board games. Now I go back to, who was a big part of it? Mego. We talk about Mego, the people that made the superhero toys and the Planet of the Apes and all that. They had a really ugly Mego stuffed King Kong type of thing. It was out there. There was
There
a
was the
board
board
game.
game, which
Yeah.
I was bidding on that, and it ended up going for over $100. So I
Oh
thought,
yeah, it was the World Trade Center. Yeah, you
yes.
climbed the World Trade Center with King Kong.
Yep.
Well, that's probably popular because of two reasons: because
Yep.
of Kong, and it's a trade center
Yep.
type of thing.
There were model kits as well.
Model kits
bought out.
of the movie poster.
Yes.
Of the big famous movie poster with
Yes.
him holding the Jets. They did have a
And
model kit of
I've
that.
got this one, which
Yeah.
is the making of book, which has got.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, that's cool.
So it's like they brought one out for Raiders Lost Ark. They brought one out for Star
Oh,
Wars.
Superman. Yeah.
These are great. So this is this is sort of before the DVD
Yeah,
documentary.
before we had extras, we actually had to read books.
And there's that fantastic artwork. That's sold the movie. How could you not?
Oh, I had that poster in my room. I remember that. There was two versions of the poster. One, he had the jet planes, and he's crushing the jet planes, and then there's another with the helicopters. I do remember there was two different posters. Both of them were out of perspective because he was never that big in the movie. There was also trading cards. Yes. I remember getting the King Kong trading cards, and on the back of it, you'd put puzzles together, and it was that great shot of him smashing through the wall or the fence out there on Skull Island as he's coming through. I had a puzzle. I remember this giant puzzle. It was like 2 feet by 3 feet. King Kong sized puzzles. Everything was King Kong. Everything was big. Dino De Laurentiis big.
Yes.
But they didn't make a comic book. I'm surprised Marvel didn't do a comic book about it. But it was something else. And like I said, I was in love with Jessica Lange. She was just gorgeous. I was like, oh my God, Jessica Lange. Forget that. Forget your Farrah Fawcett. Forget all your Charlie's Angels. Nobody compared to Jessica Lange back in the day. Yeah.
So they were trying to make a sequel. They were trying to do that for a little while. I think it was again there was issues with the rights, who actually owned the rights and things like that. 10 years later, John Gilliman, the director, came back to Dino De Laurentiis's King Kong Lives, starring.
No, let's not talk about it.
All I'm going to say is I saw this.
Oh God!
And I had nightmares.
Really?
Because I just
dreamt surgery.
No. When I just had nightmares because I remember King Kong always chasing me, and you couldn't hide from him because he could smash through all the things. I had nightmares about that. The film not very good.
The movie we'll talk about it. King Kong Lives. It has Linda Hamilton, and is it Lance Guest?
No, it's some guy I've never heard of. So
it wasn't the kid from the Blue Lagoon, was it?
Christopher Atkins? No.
There was somebody there. I can't remember. Lance Guest is the Last Starfighter, I think. It's Lance somebody. But yeah, that movie's, it's not Dennis Quaid. No, he's in Jaws 3D.
3D.
It's a bad movie. They have a female King Kong.
Yeah. So Queen who's Kong, pregnant.
And is pregnant. And they bring back Kong. They took his dead body and somehow they made a giant artificial heart and they put it inside of him and they made him come back to life. It was so stupid. Even back then, it was dumb. And I remember Linda Hamilton saying she was so high on cocaine, she had no idea what was going on because she had to be on something in that movie because it was really bad. It was one of the worst movies I think ever made.
It's not great. It's
not great at all. No, I could see why you were having nightmares. I'm sure the cast and crew still cringe.
Still do. They are in therapy, I'm sure.
No,
And
but
then,
I
yeah,
I like King Kong. I said I own it on DVD. Is there a special edition coming out from the Shout Factory? I believe it is. That's going to come out in May
yeah,
for the anniversary. Yeah, I don't know why it gets such a bad rap. It's almost like the Forgotten Kong movie. They talk
mm,
about the 33 movie, the classic, here it
yeah,
is. They talk about even the schlocky King Kong versus Godzilla.
yeah.
And
We've
then they
got,
jump
well,
to that
there's Peter
Peter
Jackson,
Jackson.
which I
Yeah.
think is actually it's
It's a good movie, but it's just too long.
too
I mean,
long. Edit.
not not
Remember,
only just a little too long, it's a lot of too long,
yeah,
okay? It's like an hour and a half too long. I
yeah,
mean, they just indulged him. I was thinking about that before we filmed this day, like, what happened with that movie? I think he had just come off the success, and I think he won the Academy Award just after before this for, Return of the King and The Lord of the
yeah,
Rings, so he could do no wrong.
yeah.
And they gave him like an unlimited budget, and he loved it. I mean, he's a huge King Kong
Yes.
fanatic, and it was just too much. If you're in love with something, you got to step aside. Somebody should have tapped him on the shoulder and said, "Peter, it looks great, but
But
it's
should
just
should Kong
too
be
much."
ice skating in Central
Oh,
Park?
the Central Park again, a brilliant scene, great special effects, but yeah, do I need to see it for 10 minutes? No, I mean,
No.
a
Do we
couple
need
seconds.
the ride to Skull Island on the boat where everyone's going, Jimmy says this and Jimmy
Says that. You know, it's funny. I interviewed the captain of that boat, who's
oh the
actually Baron Strucker from the Captain America movie.
yes,
When we were in I can't think of his name right now. It's a German sounding name, but
yes.
he talked about that movie. He said, he thought it was going to be much bigger. Obviously, a lot of people did. Unlike King Kong 76, I don't think King Kong with Peter Jackson made its money back.
It came out the same year as The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe, and The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe made more money.
Did it really?
Yeah.
I
Because I
did
was a
not know
big
that.
fan of The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe. So
I saw that I took my kids to see it. And my son Owen was such a huge King Kong fan. I don't know what it was. He just loved King Kong. He watched the original movie. He watched the 76 movie
yeah.
with me. And he was so into it. I mean, he had, like I said, there's a board game here. He had a book about it. And there was even a King Kong cartoon show
Yes.
by Rankin and Bass that I went. I have them upstairs. I found the DVDs. We got those. That's not a good show at all. It's like got a stupid opening song, but there was something about King Kong. He saw that movie, the Peter Jackson movie, and I felt so bad for this kid because he was bored to tears
Yeah.
because he loved the King Kong. But like I said, there's great effects when they're in Skull Island and they're being chased by dinosaurs, and
Oh,
you've
those
got
rubber dinosaurs. Yeah. It
it's
just
not Billy
looks
Campbell. Who is it?
no, I know.
It's Kyle Chandler, right?
Yes, yes.
Isn't he the hero? And he comes and saves the day because he's the movie actor. And then there's Emily Lloyd's character, and Jack Black is great, but again, he's over the top too much in that film. And you just needed somebody to tap him on the shoulder and saying, "Great idea, great effects, but we don't need to see
Yeah.
so much of
Yeah.
Skull Island." I mean, I think it's over an hour before you even see King Kong,
I know. I know.
right?
Yeah. It's not yeah.
And that had an intermission too. We saw that in the theaters, and it was a 3-hour movie.
Yeah.
And I do remember there was like a 2 or 3 minute intermission, and then they go to New York, and then they have the big thing. And Peter Jackson shows up at the end as one of the pilots, because I heard that the director of the first movie was also one of the airline
Yes.
pilots at the end
Yeah.
that goes to kill and shoot him. It's just, I don't know.
Anyway, so that's that version.
We're not going to review that movie. We just did it. It's like,
no.
don't even bother.
Yeah.
Don't even bother.
There's Kong Skull Island, which was set in the
Oh, yeah.
1970s as well, which was kind of fun.
Yeah.
If you've been to Hawaii, I'll put up a photo there of me and Kelly at Skull Island at the graveyard, at the
Oh,
Kong
nice.
graveyard. So
That movie, I like to think of that movie as Marvel's version of it, because you have Nick Fury, Captain Marvel,
Yeah.
Loki, and even the guy who gets blown up with the grenades is on Agent Carter. He was on that show. And then Riley, what's his name? He was in
John C.
Guardians of the
Reilly.
Galaxy. Yeah, John C. Riley. He's in it. So the whole movie is made up of Marvel comic movie actors there.
Yeah, so that was a kind of fun take. Then, of course, most recently we've got Godzilla versus Kong, or Kong versus
Yeah. Godzilla takes top billing on this one.
Godzilla versus
I
Kong.
saw it twice already. I told
Yep.
you I just wrote a review. If you want to read it, go to Fandom Spotlight. You can read my review. But I really liked it. I mean, you haven't seen it yet. I'm not going to ruin it for you, but it's one of those movies I told you. It's just like, just go and have fun. Okay. It's just a roller coaster movie. You know, don't have to sit there and analyze it. And why is this and why is that? But the only pet peeve is Kong is gigantic in this movie. He's like taller than the tallest building in Hong Kong. I don't know how they explain the height differentiation because he wasn't that big in Skull Island, right? He was like 40 or 50 feet. Now he's like 1,000 feet tall or something.
Radiation. It's a radiation gamma rays.
It's gamma radiation. And then of course Godzilla's in it, and Godzilla, who I like to think of as the dinosaur with no neck, because he's just like but it is what it is. We should do a Godzilla retrospective one day.
Yeah, all right. I'm always up for that. There's a lot of Godzilla stuff around.
There's a lot of bad Godzilla stuff too, like that movie with Matthew Broderick that came out in '98.
Let's not talk about that.
They had great toys for that though. Yeah. They actually had like a 4 or 5 foot tall Godzilla. I remember seeing it at Toys R Us. I always wanted to buy it just to torture my other figures with it.
But who would want a Matthew Broderick or Hank Azaria action figure, right?
Or Jean Reno. Is it the other actor?
Oh, yes. Yeah. That were pretty.
That you could get your Queen Amidala figure, and you can make your own professional Leon the Professional toys. But we digress. So anyway, King Kong is cool. You know what? There's even a book. I got the if you ever hear audible.com, there's a free download of the original King Kong story. It's narrated by, it sounds like Ron Perlman. It's a guy with a really gruff voice. I tried listening to it, but I actually had to stop because the voice scared me. It was just like, this is too deep. This is too dark.
And I believe they also released, John Barry did the score. It's a really great score.
The music's
they released
fantastic.
Recently an expanded score of that as well. So if you're
there's also King Kong comic books. How could I forget that? There, believe it or not, there's mashups with Tarzan meets King Kong, King Kong on the Planet of the Apes, which came out a couple years ago, which is crazy, but it's actually really good. And a lot of Skull Island books, a lot of books about Skull Island and things. And it's a great character. But here, going back to this before we wrap it up.
Yeah.
Here's the problem. I think that King Kong 1976 happened. Is he the bad guy or is he the hero of the story? Is he a tragic hero? I mean, are you angry at him for killing everybody, or you feel bad because they put him in that situation?
I feel bad because they've taken him from his home, and all he is doing is, when he sees the Twin Towers, is he's trying to go home. He thinks that's his home. So I feel sad for him.
Oh, okay. And then what about
I would cry. I would cry.
Cry, a little tear. What about the whole the girlfriend thing? What's up with that?
With him
why is he drawn? Is it more like a pet? I mean, he's like, oh look, there's my pet Jessica Lange.
I think it's Jessica Lange. You go you could be a pet rock. You could be a pet rock looking, and the pet rock would go, hey. I don't know.
Are you trying to say if B. Arthur was cast as Dwan, we never would have had the trouble that we had?
That's right. Yeah, that's it.
Okay. All right. Well, anyway.
Hey,
it's been fun, like I said.
Yeah, it has. A quick bit of trivia. Do you know he did contributed to the voice of King Kong?
The voice of King Kong?
Yeah, like a
bear?
No, Peter Cullen,
the guy from the Transformers voice, Optimus Prime. Get out! Really?
Yep.
I did not know that, Ed.
There you go.
And just Kong information.
Yeah. So there you go.
Okay, Ed, how many bananas were used in the production of this film?
Well, only 3, the size of the one that you had. So
Oh, I know. It's funny though when they feed him. Do you remember that he's in the oil tanker and they just go to the side and they just dump little piles of banana and they're like little things that land on him? I'm like, what is he supposed to do with that?
I know. It's like, it'll be like having a spurt or something like that.
Yeah, it's like, oh, thanks for the Tic Tac. I'm a little hungry here, but
that's all right.
Anyway, we digress. We talk
do. About Kong. So 1976 King Kong, definitely worth your time watching it. Perhaps if you haven't seen in a while, wait for the new Blu-ray release. I think it'll be worth it.
Yep. Yes.
with all the
Yes.
extra features and additional.
Oh, it does have extra features. It's got the definitive cut. I think it's like 148 minutes or some craziness.
Yep.
It's got every version you ever imagined, all the TV stuff, all the deleted scenes.
Yep.
It's a big Kong thing.
It's Kong sized edition.
Kong size.
That's right. So if you want to find out a little bit more about our show, Kong, about Muppet Show, about all variety of 70s, 80s, and pop culture topics, how can you find out, Mitch?
Gee, I don't know. Oh, I know, Ed. You simply hit the subscribe button and you'll know about it. And like I said, go to our channel, the Mitch and Ed channel on YouTube, and you'll see a plethora of shows ranging from 15 minutes to eating cereal to an hour-long epics about Superman and the Justice League to little 30-minute ones about the Winter Soldier and Falcon. There's something for everybody on that show. And just watch the openings, because Ed and I work a lot on those little bumpers in the front of the show that are fun. We should just do a show about how we make
that'll be
things.
when we're really bored, when we're out of
that's our best of.
We'll do a clip show.
That's our Christmas episode. Like, remember when you got the Rocketeer outfit?
Yeah, and I've got to say, actually, just quickly, as of this recording, on Tuesday is our 1-year anniversary. So happy anniversary!
Oh my goodness! Maybe Kong could show up and blow out the candles.
No. Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
Oh,
getting there.
No problem.
That's right. COVID safe. Come on.
Wow, really? Has it been a year?
It has.
They said it wouldn't fly.
That's right. Well, we're probably hovering at the moment. So,
all that YouTube money that's been coming in. Thank you, America, and all the ships at sea for making Ed and I rich beyond our wildest imaginations.
That's right. So take care of yourselves out there. This is Ed Dollister.
And this is Mitch King Kong Halleck.
And we'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.
That's my monkey face.